After trading away Geno Smith this offseason, the Seahawks are going to be counting on Sam Darnold to be a game changer under center, running Klint Kubiak's offense. What skill set does he bring to the table to bring faith that he's going to run that offense effectively? And are there any potential concerns? We're going to be taking a deep dive here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you are in Ocean Shores, Washington, or listening in Panama City, Florida. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We are going to continue our 90-man countdown today. We've got number 85 through 81, plus a Wednesday mailbag. We'll be tackling your questions off of YouTube, off of X, off of Blue Sky. Got some really fun topics to dive into in a jam-packed episode. So let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. For the first time since the Russell Wilson trade and Geno Smith taking over as the new starter, the Seahawks will have a different quarterback under center in 2025, coming in the form of Sam Darnold signing a 3-year, $100.5 million contract to open free agency. And as we talked about yesterday, Rob, there's certainly some pressure when you sign for that kind of money, even if it's not top 10 quarterback money. $100.5 million is still a lot of money, and you were expecting Sam Darnold, after a breakout year in Minnesota last season, to take the next step, not regress, not flatline. As fans, you're hoping that that was just the beginning for a former top 10 pick that's always had the physical tools to get it done. And what's interesting is putting him with Klint Kubiak, and there's going to be some parallels between what Kubiak is going to ask Darnold to do and what Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota asked the quarterback to do last year. At the same time, they don't run identical offenses, and there's plenty of differences as well. So as we did with DeMarcus Lawrence yesterday, we're going to look at one of Seattle's other big additions in free agency. And from your scouting perspective, my coaching background, we're going to take a little deeper dive into what makes Sam Darnold tick, what strengths of his fit really well in Kubiak's offense, and if there may be a few potential concerns along the way with that fit as well.
Yeah, I think that first off, with Sam Darnold, I think that that's pretty much unrealistic to expect that he is going to be able to duplicate the statistical success that he had a year ago in Kevin O'Connell's offense, with guys like Justin Jefferson. I just think that, and Jordan Addison, et cetera, that there's so many good players that the Minnesota Vikings have on offense that it was just kind of a perfect season in a lot of ways. It was the only time in Sam Darnold's NFL career that he started all 17 games. He threw 35 touchdowns against 12 interceptions. The Vikings went 14-3. It was a magical season. I do think that the Seahawks are going to be very, very good. I actually predicted earlier that I think that they're going to win 13 games this upcoming season. So I do think that Sam Darnold is going to be a huge part of that success. I just think that the Seahawks are going to be focused on running the ball so much that he is not Sam Darnold is not going to put up the same type of individual statistics. So from a fantasy football perspective, Corbin, I do want to kind of just throw that out there right off the bat, that I do not think that Sam Darnold is going to live up to the statistical numbers that he put up a season ago with the Minnesota Vikings. That said, there are some out there that have portrayed Sam Darnold as like this, this colossal bust, when the reality is that, he started 73 games in the NFL since he came in as that top 5 selection, as you alluded to before. And he's been surrounded by an awful lot of very bad football teams. And frankly, he's taken the brunt of the punishment. He's only had one season in which that he threw for more interceptions than touchdowns. He's got 30 more touchdowns than interceptions over his NFL career before he gets to the Seahawks. I mean, you put that in comparison with Geno Smith had when he, joined the Seahawks. He had less touchdowns and interceptions over his career, and by a significant margin. So again, I think that it's important just to kind of throw out some basic expectations of Sam Darnold. I love his fit in Klint Kubiak's offense. Obviously, he had worked with Klint Kubiak before, so there's going to be some familiarity there. I see a big, strong arm passer that can throw on the move, that does throw with anticipation. Yes, he can get rattled when he gets pressure in his face. We saw that in the disappointing loss to the LA Rams a year ago in the playoffs. We got sacked 9 times, but even in that game, he threw the ball with pretty good accuracy most of the day, wound up having one touchdown, 1 interception. So again, he is a guy that is going to win you some games. He's not going to lose you an awful lot of games. And that's one of the reasons why I think that he's a terrific fit, not only with Klint Kubiak, more importantly with Mike McDonald.
Yeah, when I watch Sam Darnold and I watch Klint Kubiak's offense, I have not gotten to see Darnold run this offense in Kubiak's complete vision other than a few practices here this past month. But watching Kubiak's offense in New Orleans last year, watching it when he was with the Minnesota Vikings in, I believe it was 2021 was the year that he was the offensive coordinator for the Vikings, seeing the way that his offense operates. Again, it is not a carbon copy to Kevin O'Connell's offense. O'Connell comes from the branches of the Shanahan tree that stem from Sean McVay, which means you're going to have a lot of 11 personnel with 3 receivers, 1 running back, 1 tight end on the field, and a lot of single back looks. Kubiak is more to the old school Shanahan style, that branch where he wants to get under center. He wants to run 2 back, mix in some bootlegs, and that's kind of been a staple in both sets of the offense, but more so in the more traditional Shanahan offense, which to me, that's one of the big strengths for Sam Darnold. I think he is an underrated athlete. And if you watch the way that he moves, and Seahawks fans should remember that game-winning touchdown that he threw in that game in December, where he was scrambling out to his left and made that incredible throw on the run across his body. When you get him in positions where you can move the pocket, I think that helps Sam Darnold be comfortable. It takes him away from some of the traffic that has given him issues in the past in the pocket. So I think that is going to be a big part of this offense, and it has to be to play to Darnold's strengths. Minnesota did a good job last year of getting him out of the pocket, moving the pocket some, and he does it sometimes on his own accord with his ability to break the pocket and create, as he did in that game-winning touchdown. So that is going to be a big staple. Having the run game with the 2 backs, you hope that running game is going to be dramatically improved because it takes more of that pass rushing pressure off of Darnold. So I think from that perspective, the mobility, moving the pocket, throwing on the run, those are areas that he absolutely has the strength to be able to play into this system and do a really good job. And when they do take their shot plays, Sam Darnold has the arm strength. He's got the accuracy to make those wow throws, to get downfield. If there's a concern that I have, and this is dating back to his time at USC even, and we know this, there's some riverboat gambler to Sam Darnold's game. That's the way that he plays sometimes. He's going to be incredibly aggressive, and sometimes he's going to pay for it. A lot of the time, he's going to win big when he does that. And those wow throws sometimes turned into those no, yes type decisions sometimes, and that's where trusting his arm strength can get him in trouble. I wonder about that at times in a offense that is going to be even more timing based in a lot of ways than what Kevin O'Connell's offense was. O'Connell played to that big playability with his offense last year. They made adjustments. I expect Kubiak is going to do that too, but this pure Shanahan offense, that's really what it is. It's got some small wrinkles, but this is more of a pure Shanahan offense. That timing aspect is going to be crucial, and Sam Darnold's got to be able to stay on clock. He's got to stay on time to get the ball out. And you have to hope that his tendency sometimes to be that really trigger-happy guy that he'll hold on to the ball too long because he wants to take those shots downfield. That doesn't necessarily line up with what Kubiak's going to be asking his QB to do. So there's going to be some give and take there. That would be the one area of his game that I maybe think if there is going to be something that maybe holds him back in this offense, I think Kubiak can do a lot of things to help with that and curbing that problem potentially, especially getting that run game going. But that would be the one area historically that I would maybe have some concerns if things aren't going to go well in this offense.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Sam Darnold does hold the ball a little bit longer than you'd like him to do. That to me, that was one of the bugaboos with Geno Smith as well. Is that I think that they want to see the receiver be open. They want to go for the deep shot rather than going with these little 5-7 yard kind of routes. And if you don't have excellent protection, if you don't have the receiver speed and playmaking ability to make to help a good quarterback make great plays, then I do think that is going to be a little bit of a concern. One of the things really quickly that I want to make sure, again, that I just kind of draw some distinctions between, an area that I think that Sam Darnold can help the Seahawks and be an upgrade of what we saw with Geno Smith, because I don't want this to be thought of that I'm trying to knock Geno Smith. I mean, the precision with which he can throw the football, Corbin, to me, Geno Smith is one of the most accurate quarterbacks in all of the NFL. At the same time, one of the things that used to frustrate me is that for a guy that ran a 4.59 at the I think it was at the combine, it may have been at his pro day. But the point is that Geno Smith is a terrific athlete, and it was so rare that he actually took advantage of it and escaped the pocket and ran the football. That's one of the things I've always admired about Sam Darnold going back to the USC days, is that he does have willingness to kind of lower his shoulder and use his 230-pound frame. Now, he ran a 4.85. So this is not the same caliber of athlete as Geno Smith. But Sam Darnold has shown a willingness to attack when the defense allows just open space to take advantage of. And I think that his accuracy on the move is also very beneficial, again, in Klint Kubiak's offense. So I think if there are some concerns, certainly, I think the biggest concern, at least I have, is, again, the lack of downfield speed in the Seahawks, the receivers I expect to be playing the majority of the time. JSN, of course, and Cooper Kupp. Because this offense is different. As you said, a lot more two wide receivers, a lot more couple of tight ends, couple of backs. It's not going to be the same type of wide open kind of passing offense that we saw Sam Darnold put up all those great numbers, with Minnesota. But again, I do think that Sam Darnold has proven himself to be a winner and has proven himself to be a guy that can, play that pro style offense and be the accountable leader that I think that the Seahawks have lacked at quarterback position now for quite some time.
When we come back, we have a mailbag to open up. We're going to tackle a bunch of questions from you, our valued listeners. That's coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Ever check your bank account and wonder where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you just manage your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on pizza delivery. Now I'm budgeting a little smarter and saving some money. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's time to open up the mailbag, and our first question's coming off Blue Sky, and this one is from Skylar on Blue Sky, and specifically asking Rob, what are your thoughts on the Ravens signing Jair Alexander for just $6 million total? Do you think the Seahawks could have spent that kind of money? And do you think they should have? And I'll add this to the question, Rob, just kind of as context. There are reports that he turned down bigger money from other teams. So it is possible the Seahawks might have been one of those teams, and he ultimately picked the Ravens to continue his NFL career.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely possible. Just because Jair Alexander is a really good football player, and you don't have to tell John Schneider and Mike McDonald that. And so they have at least explored the possibility of bringing in a cornerback. That said, I think that Jair Alexander wanted to reunite with his former Louisville teammate, Lamar Jackson, in Baltimore. Yep. When Lamar Jackson said it right off the bat that he wanted Jair Alexander, he wanted the Baltimore Ravens to sign him, I thought that the writing was on the wall. And these are two players that have had a great deal of NFL success. Financially, they're okay. Jair Alexander can kind of pick and choose his options. And so I think that he made a terrific choice because the Baltimore Ravens are a Super Bowl contender. They are a team that has an awful lot of talent on both the offense and defensive side of the ball. And again, I just think the reunification aspect of it is something that pulled Jair Alexander to the Baltimore Ravens. And frankly, every other NFL team probably would have had to have offered double the type of money to really get him to even consider going elsewhere.
We've got a question here on YouTube coming from, I can't think of a better name. Trust me, I've dealt with that as well. Corbin, what do you think are the odds at the moment for Jadeveon Clowney and Shaquille Griffin to end up with the Seahawks? So let's start off with Griffin because that's a name that kind of has whimpered away a little bit in terms of rumors. There was stuff going on in May, in April, about him possibly returning to Seattle. And Rob, we haven't heard anything new really for the better part of a month or so on that front. It just didn't happen. I'm going to say right now that one is 10%. And if you would have asked me a month ago, it might have been a little higher, but this is after watching OTAs and minicamp. And I talked about this in our takeaways after a couple of those practices. Shamar Jean-Charles looked pretty good in those practices. Their free agent signing. They like where Nehemiah Pritchett is at in his development. He made some plays during their offseason practices. And then you've got Reek Woolen. Josh Jobe looks like he's ready to pick up where he left off after that reclamation season for him last year coming to Seattle. And Devin Witherspoon. The corner depth might be a lot better than we're anticipating, especially if you're able to mix in guys like Nick Emenwari in to play the slot as a big nickel. You don't have as much need to have 3, 4, 5 corners that you have to lean on. So I don't know that it's as big of a need as they may have perceived that it might have been a month and a half ago. So I'm going to say 10%. Clowney, I'm still going high. I'm going 80% on that. I still think there is a really good chance the Seattle Seahawks are going to add another edge to this group because I think once you get past the first 4, there is a massive drop-off there. And I just think the chance to reunite with Mike Macdonald at this stage of his career with the way he played in Baltimore 2 years ago in the same defense, I think Clowney coming back to Seattle, that is the one that I'm still betting on, that I think has a really good chance to happen for the Seahawks. Next question here coming from Elo Tato, and this is for both of us. What would both you and Rob's ideal starting O-line look like in week 1? We might be thinking the same, and maybe we have 1 or 2 differences, but what would your ideal offensive line look like based on what you know right now for that opener against the 49ers?
Well, probably the one that most people are expecting. I think basically from left to right, Charles Cross, Gray Zabel, Oluwatimi, at the right guard position. I'm going to go with Christian Haynes and then Abe Lucas at right tackle.
Yeah, I'm thinking pretty much the same thing. If there was one spot that I might end up having a difference, I think Oluwatimi's going to win the center job, but Jalen Sundell's athleticism and that connection with Gray Zabel from all those snaps they played together at North Dakota State, I don't think we can completely rule that out yet, and he could be a really, really good fit for this offense, but I'm still thinking right now, ideally, you're hoping that Oluwatimi holds on to that job and builds off how he played last season. So I think you and I are in full agreement on this. And look, we mostly answer NFL questions on here, but I had to add this one, hence why I'm wearing this shirt here today to go with this question that is coming off of Blue Sky from Byron. And Byron, I just love this question. From a football standpoint, who would win an 11-on-11 game, Gremlins or Critters? That was actually, I had to think about this. I was like, first off, is there going to be water? Because if there's water, we already know who's going to win this game. But if there's not water and we are in a dome, I got to go with these guys. I mean, the poisonous darts, the mouse, they're going to eat up the competition. If there's water, then I'm thinking the other way. So really, this is going to be decided by the elements, not necessarily the players on the field. So kind of a fun, goofy question, pop culture-wise there. Rob, let's get back to football with one more question here. And that is going to be coming from Rob Roberts on X. Given the current roster and coaching staff, I would love to hear your opinions about the offense. Better or worse than last season? Any obvious areas of improvement and deterioration? Deterioration. I like that aspect there, that verbiage.
Yeah, I think just real quick, just to have some fun back with the last question real quick. I think you got to go critters. They're the bigger ones, and that's my style of football. So I'm just going to go with that one. I mean, I haven't watched those movies in an awful long time, but I do have some memories of it. And the Gremlins were, the little guys, and so as exciting as that might be, at the same time, again, I'm all about the size, the physicality, and that kind of leads me into the conversation here when it comes to the coaching changes. I think that I am a big fan of Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff as coaches. I thought that at times they maybe were a little bit overwhelmed a year ago. It's certainly when it came to like halftime adjustments and things like that. And I thought that probably should have been anticipated, frankly. But I think that the Seahawks felt like they were kind of under the gun to make some hiring. Again, I have a great deal of respect for both those coaches. I think they're going to be very successful and quite possibly go back to the NFL someday. But at the same time, I think that when you have a coaching staff like Klint Kubiak, John Benton, Rick Dennison, et cetera, I just think that the experience that they have, I mean, we're talking about, I believe it's 60 plus years of combined experience that they have. Corbin, I think they're going to be kind of leading the charge rather than reacting so much. And so I just think that the confidence in what you are preaching and teaching to the young players, I think is huge. I think the ability to adjust. I think that the focus when it comes to like the running game, for example, the focusing on the wide zone rather than trying to sprinkle and pick your poison, Baskin Robbins, is expression I often use there. Or choose your own flavor, kind of a Baskin Robbins thing, I guess. So again, I just think that you're going to see and feel the experience difference with this coaching staff. And again, it's one of the biggest reasons why I'm just very much believe that the Seahawks are going to destroy some of the national expectations that have the Seahawks winning 7 or 8 games. I think, again, it's going to be more like 13 or 14.
Yeah, and if you're looking for deterioration areas, we've talked about the receiving core, which could still be really solid, but you more so than I have been more negative on that. But I think that there still is some interesting competition there. There's maybe still a chance to add to that group. The one name that I am going to throw out there, and this is not sourcing, this is just me just speculating here a little bit. I would not be shocked if Amari Cooper ends up in a Seahawks uniform. That's just something I'm going to throw out there because he is still available, and I think he is still a quality player. Maybe not what he used to be, but another guy that can give you some downfield splash still and has some boundary talent. So that is something. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not predicting it. But if it does, I will not be surprised because he is going to play this year. It's just going to be a question of where's the fit. And I think he has enough differences from Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith and Jigba that he can come into this offense and give them some different wrinkles than what they have. So we'll see. Just throwing that name out there if they're going to continue to add players to that group going into the 2025 season. When we come back, we've got to continue our 90-man countdown, numbers 85 through 81. Those will be coming up next year on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Continuing our 90-man countdown, we've got numbers 85 through 81, and we're going to have a few guys on this list that have NFL experience. Yesterday was all about the undrafted rookies. We've still got plenty of those, but starting with number 85, let's talk about a player that's got some NFL experience. Tyler Hall, who played his college ball, for some reason I'm going brain dead here.
Wyoming,
that is correct. He played at Wyoming and actually had a chance to see him play at Wyoming during his senior season against Mountain West competition. It was about 45 minutes north of where I lived. So I was able to go up there and watch him. And Tyler Hall is a guy 5'10", around 188, 190 pounds, not a big corner. He's played slot. He's played a little bit in the boundary. He has bounced around. I believe he's been with 6 NFL teams, either on the active roster or practice squad, 2 stints with the Seahawks last year. This is a guy that's quietly had a decent offseason, and we've caught coaches praising him frequently. He's made some plays on the football, and he did have a sack and 4 pass breakups in 7 games for the Raiders back in 2023. He played in 4 games for the Rams when they won the Super Bowl, the year they won the Super Bowl. So he actually suited up for 31 games in an NFL uniform, regular season games. That's something that a lot of the guys near the bottom of this list can't say. He has had a hard time sticking with the team, but we've talked about the depth potential concerns there. He's played a lot. He's got experience both inside and outside, and he's played a lot of special teams. So while I think he's probably on the outside looking in, it's a name that I wouldn't completely dismiss competing for one of those final roster spots.
Yeah, I agree with you, Corbin. I got a chance to watch some tape on him, and the tape was better than I thought it was going to be when I just kind of looked at him on the hoof as far as just his size. As you said, I mean, he's listed at 5'10". He actually measured in way back, and this is years ago at his Wyoming Pro Day, but he measured in there at 5'08.3". So under 5'8.5". So again, he's a smaller cornerback, and then usually that means you're going to have to slide inside to play that nickel spot. And when you're a small guy playing nickel, you may have the quickness to be able to handle those slot receivers, but you're often going to struggle with the physicality. You're going to be that much closer to the big guys in the running game. He's actually pretty scrappy for a smaller player. Yeah. And he's got some kick return ability. So the special teams aspect of it, the fact that he kind of, punches a little bit above his weight class, so to speak, I think that he does have kind of a scrapper's chance. So he's an interesting cornerback for a team that possibly needs some help at that position.
Yeah, and he's, again, was wearing number 33. He was a player that jumped out quite a few times during OTAs. We haven't talked about him really because there was a lot of other corners that made plays too, but he's one that I'm kind of interested to see what he looks like when we get into training camp and the pads come on, because he does have more physicality and nastiness than you would expect being a smaller corner. He does play above his weight class. Next here at number 84 on our list, Seth Coleman, the edge out of Illinois. And yesterday we talked Jalen Gaines, and he's another one of the undrafted players. He's coming from Illinois State. Seth Coleman played at Illinois, so obviously much better competition in the Big Ten. A Illinois team that won 10 games last year in the Big Ten. And a big reason for that, their defense, once again, was one of the better ones in the conference. And Coleman was a big part of that. Now, his sack numbers were very inconsistent in his 4 years at Illinois. He had a year with 6. He had a couple years that he failed to get to 3. So his roller coaster production with sacks, that's one of the reasons that he didn't get drafted. But this is a guy that ran a 4.68 40-yard dash at 6'5", 242 pounds. So he's a leaner guy, but he ran pretty darn fast. And he also had a 36.5-inch vertical, and he had a really good short shuttle time. So this is a player that's going to bring you some athletic traits of a draftable player to the equation. And that's why he was a priority free agent signing. And the other thing I like about it, the dude knocks the football down at the line of scrimmage. He had 13 pass breakups in his college career at Illinois. He also forced a couple fumbles. So he does some things getting his hands on the football in that regard that the Seahawks have not been necessarily good at the last couple of years. That 5th spot, if you don't bring in a veteran, one of these undrafted guys might have a shot to get in the rotation. Coleman actually has played the run tougher than you would think his size, and he's got some athletic traits, like I said, that are draftable athletic traits. So I'm going to be watching him very closely in that battle for rotational reps at the edge position.
Yeah, it's funny that you said like deserved to be drafted or, should have been drafted, could have been drafted, because that's exactly what I have in my notes as well, is that you see some flashes on tape, and he had a terrific workout. He has been a fairly productive player. I mean, he's averaged over 50 tackles a year each of the last 3 seasons, with basically 5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss each of those years. None of those numbers are just eye-popping, but they're not bad. And when you kind of put it into some context with how good this last year's edge rusher class was, was, Corbin. I just think that Seth Coleman was a guy that kind of just fell through the cracks a little bit. And so the Seahawks might wind up being that much better off because of it. He's got those long arms. You talked about his ability to knock the passes down the line of scrimmage, 34-inch arms. Again, there are some traits here that are interesting enough to think that this guy does have a chance.
Let's go to the interior now, and this is one of my favorite names for the new guys that have been added to the Seahawks. Wycavius Bubba Thomas. And when you hear a name like that, like when I first heard the name, I thought, oh boy, they just signed a 350-pound defensive tackle, because that's just what I anticipated. But this is a different body type for a nose, and he is squarely listed as a nose, and that's where he played at South Alabama. He was a one-tech and zero-tech primarily for South Alabama. He's only listed at 302 pounds. And normally that is not a nose tackle type, but he's only 6'1". So he's that shorter, compact, powerful build. And when you turn on the tape, you see some penetrating ability. He had 7.5 sacks in his 4 seasons that he played consistent reps at South Alabama. There's some tackle for loss ability on film, and he has some good film against double teams, some bad plays as well. He's been more inconsistent there. But as far as the guy Seattle has signed, even though he doesn't fit the size metrics, he is a shorter, stockier build. So he has the leverage capabilities that somebody like Anthony Campbell is going to have a hard time doing as a nose tackle in the NFL. And so Bubba Thomas, he is a guy that I think might have a chance to at least hang around deep into training camp and in the preseason, at least get his name out there, because they don't really have a second nose tackle, a true nose tackle on the roster. And even though his size metrics don't match, he has the build when you look at him physically that you think he could play that nose tackle position.
Yeah, he's built like a fire hydrant. He's just really short and squat, and he's just hard to move. And as you said, I mean, you think about a guy that's built like that. They're usually not very quick, and yet he is, and he plays hard. And so again, there's some traits there that I think are very intriguing to a squad that has some needs at the nose guard position.
All right, going to number 82 here. Let's talk tight ends. And this is a player that actually had a couple really nice long catches during mandatory minicamp, including one from Jalen Milroe to close out mandatory minicamp. It led to a touchdown pass a couple plays later. Marshall Lang coming from Northwestern, and Lang is listed at 6'3", 249. He's not a small tight end necessarily, but he's not a big one either. Not a guy that you would think is going to be much of an inline blocker, and yet Northwestern used him quite a bit in that capacity, and there's some solid film of him as a blocker. He played some as an H-back. He got a few snaps out of the backfield as well. I don't expect they're going to be using him in that capacity, but for an undrafted rookie coming from the Big Ten, you've played against some of the best competition, and this is a player who, when he had his chances, had a pretty high catch rate with subpar quarterback play, showed some after-the-catch ability. I think this is a position that's going to be extremely hard for undrafted rookies to have any chance to crash at tight end. But Marshall Lang has at least shown a little bit of upside in these practices during OTAs and minicamp, and showed some ability to move. He didn't run a fast 40, but he had really good testing numbers, explosiveness and quickness-wise. So there is some athleticism there and a little bit of an all-around game. Again, practice squad's probably the limit for this guy right now, but you did see at least some NFL caliber traits. We keep bringing that up, but several of these guys have at least some traits that you can work with.
Well, I'm encouraged by the fact that you said that he had a couple of big catches, just because he did not catch the ball all that much at Northwestern. He was used primarily as a blocker, and he is an effective blocker. He doesn't have elite size. He doesn't have elite athletic ability, but again, he's an effective blocker. He's powerful. He's kind of, again, scrappy, gets after it, uses his hands very well, plays a good solid base, knows. That's one of the things you kind of know if we're going to stereotype players. You know about Northwestern and just academics is a huge it's kind of like Stanford in the old Pac-12. And that there's just a higher academic standard to play at Northwestern, and so you kind of just know that going in. And this is an offense that is going to ask the tight ends to make some adjustments. They're going to have to be much more versatile than just either a receiver or a blocker kind of a system that we've seen sometimes from Seattle in the past. So again, I don't see a guy who's a dynamic athlete. I don't think that anybody's going to confuse him with Elijah Arroyo, for example. But at the same time, for a club that has some turnover at the tight end position, of course, that they were expecting Pharaoh Brown to be the big physical blocker a year ago, and he's no longer with the Seahawks. So there is a possible spot for a player like Lang to be able to make this squad.
And capping off this latest cluster of players, let's go to the offensive line. And if you want to look at players near the bottom of this list in terms of pedigree, Amari Kite was a 4-star recruit that ended up at Alabama. That's where he started his college career, was there for a couple seasons, and then transferred to Central Florida. And that is when he was able to consistently get into the lineup. And this past season, 97.7% pass blocking efficiency rate. Not terrible, not great. He was in the middle of the pack. He did give up 4 sacks, but you saw some solid film both as a gap and zone blocker in the run game. His athleticism on film is better than what he tested. His testing was, quite frankly, really poor, which surprised me because when you turn on the tape, again, I see a guy that's got some movement skills. I see some lateral agility. And when he tested, though, those numbers would suggest he doesn't have any of that. But on film, you could see it. And just as we kind of talked about yesterday with a couple of offensive linemen, it is going to be very hard for any of these undrafted rookies on the O-line with all the investments that have been made in draft picks the last 4 years, 3 or 4 years by the Seahawks. It's going to be really hard for any of these guys to make this football team. But Amari Kite does have that pedigree, and he was a guy that was a top recruit. Alabama wanted him. He played a few snaps there. He's got enough talent to at least potentially, maybe he comes in and he pushes a guy like Mason Richmond, which I don't think there's that big of a gap between those two players, a 7th rounder and a guy that was a priority undrafted free agent. The Seahawks clearly had him about in that same area, with Richmond having a little higher grade as a 4-year starter in the Big Ten. Maybe he pushes Richmond. We've seen undrafted rookies take 7th rounders and beat them out in Seattle. It's happened plenty of times. That being said, I think he's another player right now, practice squad. Seems like that would probably be the ideal scenario for him if he can play to the athleticism that he did in college and doesn't look like the guy who had a 1-point-something RAS score at the tackle position. It was, like I said, it was a really disappointing workout by a guy who I think is more athletic than he showed that day.
No, he is. I 100% agree with the assessment that you just gave. That you watch him on tape and you think, oh, this guy's got a little bit to him. The lateral agility, his ability to block on the move. At the same time, the workout, the pro day workout, he wasn't invited to the combine, I believe. At 5.30 in the 40-yard dash, that's a little slower than you want, especially in an offensive tackle playing in this type of a system where the Seahawks have traditionally gone with guys in the 5.10 or faster kind of numbers. 17 reps on the bench press is a little bit of a lower number. He's got 33 3/4-inch arms, so you would have liked to have seen that number be at 20, or more, of course. I just don't see the explosive pop on contact, not as consistently as I'd like. And obviously the fact that he started at Alabama, then dropped down to a lower level of competition, and that's where he started to really play. Still, as you said, guys that are athletic and guys that have size, guys that have starting experience, those are always big men, big offensive linemen are just – they're so rare in today's NFL. So I think that Amari Kite is playing for an opportunity for the Seahawks, obviously. But at the same time, any practice time, any time that he's going to get in a joint practice or in any preseason games, then every other NFL team out there is going to be evaluating, just because offensive linemen are so rare that everybody is just fighting, scratching, clawing to get them. And Kite has enough natural talent to be able to warrant a lot of investigating.
Yep, it's a game of scarcity when you're talking offensive linemen, especially when you're looking at the preseason. That is a position You have somebody that you're trying to sneak to a practice squad, it can be tough because other teams are needing offensive line help as well. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to have our post-off-season positional breakdown, the cornerback spot. We talked a little bit about today, a little teaser. We're going to dive into that tomorrow and the next 5 players on our 90-man countdown. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and thanks for listening in. Go Hawks.